Welcome back for our final week of Canceled. Throughout this series, we've talked a little bit about social media. So I'm curious, do you follow any famous people online? Are there any famous people you hate follow? You know, someone you follow because they always make you cringe? In case you need more proof that people tend to have strong opinions about celebrities, all you need to do is check the comment section of any famous person's social media posts. Alongside comments from their fans, you'll nearly always see jokes, name-calling, arguments, and hate. And every week there seems like there's a new villain of the week trending online. Yet another famous person, politician, or organization that everyone loves to hate, either for something silly or because they said something offensive. Like we talked about in the first week of this series, social media has led to a phenomenon called cancel culture. A big jumble of online behaviors, some helpful and justified, and some not. Like calling out, shaming, boycotting, and holding people accountable for their actions. It happens when people troll and start online feuds for fun. They fuel celebrity drama with hashtags. Some people use social media to embarrass or hurt each other for a laugh or for revenge. And other people call out or cancel others for legitimate reasons, especially public figures who said or did something very harmful. But today I don't want to talk about internet trolls or celebrity drama. I want to talk about what happens when we have legitimate reasons to cancel someone. Whether it's online, in our families, or in our circles of friends, there's never a shortage of people we love to hate, especially when we feel there's a good reason for that hatred. When someone hurts us, it's tempting to cancel them by loving to hate them, talking poorly about them, dehumanizing them, or taking revenge on them. It's really complicated, isn't it? When we're hurt, of course we want to stick up for ourselves and hold people accountable for their actions. But God also calls us to forgive and show grace rather than seeking revenge. So how do we balance accountability with grace and forgiveness? Does forgiving someone mean pretending like the hurt never happened? When do we need to seek justice? And when do we need to just let something go? Last week we heard the story of David and King Saul, focusing mostly on Saul. This week we're going to look at that same story but focus on David. In case you need a recap, Saul was the king of Israel, but David had been chosen by God to be the next king. Saul liked David at first, but eventually became incredibly envious of David. Because of his envy, Saul tried to kill him, repeatedly. He even rallied his armies of soldiers to help him hunt and kill David. Now, can we all agree that David had a valid reason to hate Saul? It would have been totally reasonable for David to want revenge. But here's what happened instead. Let's look at 1 Samuel 24. When Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, "David is in the wilderness near En-Gedi." So Saul took 3,000 of Israel's fit young men and went to look for David and his men in front of the rocks of the wild goats. When Saul came to the sheep pens along the road, a cave was there, and he went in to relieve himself. David and his men were staying in the recesses of the cave, so they said to him, "Look, this is the day the Lord told you about. I will hand your enemy over to you, so you can do to him whatever you desire." Then David got up and secretly cut off the corner of Saul's robe. Afterward, David's conscience bothered him, because he had cut off the corner of Saul's robe. He said to his men, "As the Lord is my witness, I would never do such a thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed. I will never lift my hand against him, since he is the Lord's anointed." With these words, David persuaded his men, and he did not let them rise up against Saul. Then Saul left the cave and went on his way. Two things. First, yes, the bathroom thing is funny. Second, what? Not only did David not kill Saul, he didn't even hurt him. He cut off a piece of Saul's robe as evidence, but felt remorseful about it, and then let Saul leave in peace. When David had the opportunity to take revenge and let hate guide him, he chose to let Saul go instead. In this moment, David chose to love Saul in spite of his actions. That doesn't mean David suddenly liked Saul or wanted to be his best friend, but David showed love instead of hate by showing mercy to Saul instead of revenge. Like we mentioned last week, David and Saul didn't exactly reconcile. The best they could do was promise to stay away from each other, and they did. For the rest of their lives, they never saw each other again. Now keep in mind, the story we're reading is from a different time and culture. It's about two powerful men, and not people like you and me, who definitely don't rule nations or command armies. This is also the story of two adults, not teenagers. So before we go any further, let me make a few things clear. The moral of the story is not to be nice to someone who is abusive or dangerous. It's not to not ask for help when you're in danger. It's not to not seek justice when someone has harmed you. If you are in a position now, or you have been in the past, where someone, especially an adult, is harming you or harming someone else, please tell one of the adults around you that you trust. God doesn't tell us to put ourselves in harm's way or to endure abuse or violence. It does not honor God when you allow yourself to be hurt or mistreated. God loves you, sees you, and has put the adults in our group in your life to help protect you. Please tell us and we will help. Got it? Good. We love you. So if that's not the lesson we should take from this story, what is? Like we said last week, it's helpful when reading Old Testament stories to look ahead to the words of Jesus and see what he had to say. Let's look at Matthew 5. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't resist an evildoer. On the contrary, if anyone slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. As for the one who wants to sue you and take away your shirt, let him have your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to the one who asks you, and don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. As he often did, Jesus flipped the script on the world's wisdom about love and hate. Instead of telling his audience to love those who love them and hate those who hate them, Jesus challenged them, and us, to try something new, to love our enemies. Although David lived many years before Jesus spoke these words, David understood God wouldn't want him to return Saul's hatred with more hatred. His decision to show Saul love instead of vengeance points to what Jesus challenges us to do. Love the people we want to hate. Let's talk about this phrase, turn the other cheek, because it's often misunderstood. When Jesus said this, he didn't mean never stand up for yourself or others, let people walk all over you. Jesus had no problem verbally defending himself. Jesus often got angry at people who were cruel and hurtful. But Jesus never sought revenge or was cruel to others or escalated a conflict because his pride was wounded. Here's what I think Jesus did mean when he said turn the other cheek. When someone attacks, hurts, or lashes out at you, don't be overcome by anger. Don't plot your revenge. Don't escalate the situation. Don't react without thinking. Respond wisely instead. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret about Jesus. Many people think of Jesus only as a kind, gentle, peace-loving man. But Jesus was also a revolutionary. He upset both religious and political leaders of his day. They all wanted him dead. Jesus' enemies would often try to provoke or trap him so they could have an excuse to arrest him. But Jesus knew better. Imagine for a moment that you're angry with someone. You punch them in the face looking for a fight. But then something strange happens. They don't hit back. Instead, they take a breath, raise their hands, look you straight in the eye, and turn their head, giving you the perfect shot to punch them again. Here's what I hope you would do in that moment. Stop and consider what you've just done. Realize you can't hit them again because you clearly become the bad guy. Calm down, feel ashamed, and walk away. That's the power of love over hate and of self-control instead of revenge. When we react in anger or seek revenge, we escalate conflicts, which makes it much more difficult for the person who has hurt us to come to terms with what they did. After all, if you punch them back, they'll have a reason to hit you again, and might even think their first punch was justified. When Jesus said turn the other cheek, he wasn't telling us just get over it. He was telling us to strategically choose love instead of hatred, because love changes things. So who are your enemies? Who are you tempted to hate because of the way they hurt or treated you? Who have you hurt out of a desire for revenge, and how can you make it right? How can you stop the back and forth exchange of hatred and retaliation? How can you strategically choose to love someone you want to hate? When someone hurts us, it's natural to want to cancel them and make them pay. But it's possible to hold someone accountable for their actions without adding to the hatred in the world. The world needs us to model a new way forward, the way of love, not hate. It would be challenging, but the most important things are. This change can start with us when we decide to forgive. Forgiveness isn't something we do for the person who hurt us. It's something we do for ourselves and God. Whether they've asked for our forgiveness or not, we can choose to let go of bitterness toward the people who have hurt us. You may not be ready to fully forgive that person today, and that's okay. Forgiveness is often a journey. When we notice, we all need people to model for us what compassion and love look like. But the good news is that these examples are everywhere. We just have to pay attention. When we defend, we've talked a lot about what to do when we've been hurt. But don't forget that other people are being hurt all the time. You might notice someone being bullied at school, or you might begin to explore deep and systemic problems like injustice, racism, and inequality. If you were David being hunted by the king, you would have wanted someone to defend you, right? We can do that for others. And when we pray, these things we've talked about today are difficult. If we choose love instead of hate, we're going to need a lot of help. We have to learn to pray for those who've hurt us or who are hurting others, just like Jesus said. It's hard to hate someone when you're consistently praying for them. As we close, I want to challenge you to pray for the person you're most tempted to hate right now. Ask God to help you choose love instead of revenge. If we choose to hate our enemies, hate will only grow. But if we choose to love our enemies with God's help, that love will grow, spread, and even change our culture. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth it. Like Jesus said, and David did too, God's challenging you to love the people you want to hate and see how it changes you, changes them, and changes the world.